Well, welcome to the Nerds for Humanity podcast. Hello, nerds. We have Dylan Hirsch-Shell in the house. He's running for the mayor of a major city, San Francisco. Welcome to the show, Dylan.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for getting my last name correct. Not too many people do that. So it's usually Herschel or something along those lines.
Oh,
So
well, I'm glad we're off to a good start, and I know
yeah, well,
you're
for sure.
you're old school Yang Gang. You were a supporter of the People Project as well. So thank you for everything you've done. Um,
Yeah, no, I've been a huge supporter of yours. Been a fan since way back, like I said, in the Yang Gang days. I used to watch your videos and Paget, and it was a lot
Ages
of
ago, yeah.
yeah. I mean, you were doing a huge public service, so thank you. All these years later, still stuck in my mind. And yeah, I mean, Andrew Yang's run for the presidency is really kind of what motivated me to even consider running for mayor. Him being this quantitatively minded
Hmm.
person speaking my kind of language, it was really inspirational to see the kind of traction he was able to get despite that emphasis on making America think harder. And so that like I said, that's a big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing currently. But yeah, I mean, of the people also, I think was a great project. I was really sad to see it get shuttered. I was supporting you guys on Patreon with that as well. And I don't know if we'll get into it or not, but I think given how much of politics revolves around money, these
Hmm.
kinds of more forward-thinking, outside the box type of solutions to getting recognition for candidates will become incredibly important for our democracy. And that's why I was a supporter of yours, because I think and I'm seeing this currently with my candidacy for mayor. So I'm already facing the same thing that Yang faced, early on. I'm being labeled a long shot candidate.
Hmm.
I'm getting asked, well, what's your current cash on hand for your campaign? How many donations have you gotten from how many unique donors? And for me, I'm operating in a completely different world where I'm thinking, okay, I want to connect with voters through every channel I possibly can. That's
Hmm.
going to be the most cost effective, which means I'm not trying to maximize how much money I'm making through donations. I'm maximizing voter engagement per dollar. So it's a totally different mindset, and it's the kind of mindset we really need in our city government as well. Because I don't know if you've seen the latest budget that just came out from the mayor's office, but
I haven't.
we were on a $14.6 billion budget. Now it's going to be at least 15.5 billion, which is exactly the wrong direction, that we should be going in. when
Wow.
when you look at where we were at and what services we were getting for that kind of money, it's just, to me, it's bonkers that we're continuing to increase our spending without taking a long hard look at where's the money we're currently spending going, and why has the city actually lost people over the last 5 years population wise, yet our per capita spending has gone up 26% without a concurrent increase in the efficacy of our services and programs. So, yeah, I could get into a lot more, but anyway, I'll stop talking and let you
There's a, no,
respond.
there's a lot of great stuff there. First on the of the People Project, for those who don't know, what we tried to do is we tried to build like a Yelp for political candidates where you could discover candidates easily, learn more about them, compare them, approval vote them, filter by like interests and tags and things like that. I think so thanks again for your support for that project and to all who donated to it. And there was a bunch of us who volunteered, many weekends over many years, to build that thing. I think one of the biggest learnings we had was that for what it, I would say, unfortunately, I think a lot of voters don't necessarily do the research that they would normally do if they were buying like a pair of headphones or whatever. Like that,
Yeah, yeah,
that
that's a great
you know,
comparison.
like
Yeah,
they
totally.
they they might look at like 10 different sources and talk to all these people, but if it's like picking a candidate, it's like, oh, I heard of this person, they're on the ballot, sounds good to me, kind of thing. So we might reform as a volunteer group, and I think if we did it again, we'd probably focus more on building tools for candidates
Mhm.
to run their campaigns more cost effectively, especially if they're like short on cash, like, or they're like a startup campaign. Um, but we try to go from the bottom up, like working with giving a service to voters. And right now, I don't think there's a lot of pull from voters for more information about candidates, as much as I wish there would have been. But we, learned a lot, and I think we had like over 15,000 voters hit the site. So it was good. It just wasn't like growing at the rate that would justify putting another few years into it.
Yeah, and that's fair. And sometimes you just have to know when to cut your losses
Yeah.
and go back to square one. But I wonder how much of that lack of attention is a symptom of another topic that you and I actually share a lot in common is the notion of voting methods as a
Mhm.
a filter
Right.
for getting good candidates to actually become elected. And as you're well aware, having selected approval voting for of the people, um, the plurality based
Mhm.
system with the winner takes all that dominates our current landscape tends to give pretty atrocious results, which then I think tends to perpetuate this apathy because people just feel like there's no point in them even voting, or if they are going to bother to vote, there's not much point in wasting a bunch of time investigating candidates who sound great on paper but are not really electable. And so, uh, I've actually been probably the single largest individual donor to the Center for Election Science, which is a national nonprofit
Mhm.
organization that has been pushing really hard for getting approval voting adopted all over the country. And I've also been a huge supporter. I was another donor for the Star voting
Yeah.
campaign that unfortunately just failed up in Eugene, Oregon, and that was a result of some pretty, shall we say, dirty politics on the part of ranked choice voting advocates who have decided that it's got to be ranked choice voting or nothing at all. I don't know how much of that story you followed, but
A little bit. Yeah.
it was the stereotypical nefarious. Let's create a fake nonprofit organization. Literally, they just put up a website that said, we're a tribal council and we hate star voting. More to come soon. Like that was literally the only information about this supposed organization that didn't exist until a couple months ago. So it was astroturfing in the extreme. But yeah. Anyway, so I mean, I bring this up, even though I'm running for mayor of San Francisco, and it's not on point for my campaign, but I think it is. It's in line with my general concern for and you know my attempt at saving democracy as we know it through whatever means necessary. And I think voting method reform is a huge component of that to try to turn things around, get it so that we are actually electing really compelling candidates whose interests align with that of the centroid of the electorate rather than the highest magnitude strongest faction, which is what plurality tends to
Yep.
tends to support. So anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to get all that out there because I feel like, as a fellow nerd, I think you can appreciate that the devil's in the details, and so there's so many moving parts here, and it's all so complex, but it's all kind of interacting in strange ways.
Yeah, the whole star versus ranked choice voting is such an interesting tension because both sides are advocating that the current system is really messed up. And for whatever reason, ranked choice has kind of gotten more mind share than star, even though like I've seen some analyses that show like, well, there are some cases where ranked choice doesn't do what you think it will do, or there's these kind of unintended consequences um, that would not affect star as much. And I'm kind of torn on it because I definitely don't like the plurality method. And I kind of feel like ranked choice is starting to get like some momentum. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, the metric system's better than the imperial system, but maybe if the imperial is getting a little more kind of interest, it's better than whatever preceded that. And so yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. I wonder, if you tried to do an efficiency study on, what are the benefits of using the metric system in terms of, ease of calculation and
Hmm.
reduced errors that get introduced when you use some totally cockamamie scheme like the imperial system where nothing's an even divisor. But yeah, I mean, ranked choice voting, I think it has the appearance of having momentum because it's been around in this country for over 100 years at this point. So of course it would be,
Mm.
you would think, benefiting from that kind of long history. The reality is it's not to turn this into a voting methods discussion necessarily, but it was adopted in many cities in the early 20th century, and then it was pretty swiftly repealed in most of those cities, with Cambridge, Massachusetts being one very prominent holdout that
Mm.
maintained their use of ranked ballots. But there's a political scientist named Jack Santucci who wrote a whole book on this. You can find him on X. He sends out posts from time to time talking about this kind of stuff. But he'll be the first to point out it may appear like it's the latest and greatest invention, but it's actually been around the block and got kicked to the curb. So,
Mm.
um,
How is
but
the San Francisco mayorship? How does that how are votes counted in that
we
race?
have ranked choice voting. It's been in place since 2002,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a bit silly because they limit how many you can rank, how many candidates you can rank.
Oh.
So ranked choice voting already has some pathologies you kind of alluded to earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes down to randomness, chaos in the order in which candidates get eliminated, and then that
Mm-hmm.
is highly sensitive, or the way that the votes get reapportioned, when the first place ranking on your ballot gets knocked out, your ballot goes to your second place ranking. Well, if your first place candidate got knocked out first, great, your second choice goes right away to help another candidate. But if your first place survived one round, and
Mm.
then the next round, your first place, I mean, it's almost impossible to explain in any way that makes sense. But just trust me that it's a crapshoot on who's going to win, because you're not looking at all the information all at once in a giant snapshot of all the ballots. You're doing this weird kind
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
eliminate one, then reshuffle it around, eliminate another, shuffle it around. And if you just, you go off by 2 votes in any given round, the result would be totally different in many
Mm.
cases. So
Yeah. I've seen both the ranked choice advocate case of Alaska being a success, but I've also seen analysis saying like, no, it didn't do what you think it did at all, and here's why. And
Yeah,
part of the challenge, I think, with this discussion is it's already hard enough for some people to even understand how ranked choice voting works at all. Then to say, and now that you understand it, let me lay out where it kind of breaks. It's
yeah,
like you've lost them.
that's right.
A lot of the audience, like they may not, want to go for that ride.
That's right. That's right. It takes a special kind of person to really want to dig into that. And it's not realistic to expect most people to, even if they have the time, to be interested in it. And most people don't even have the time. They're busy leading their lives.
Yeah.
So it's our job. It should be our job as people who are, designing systems with real human beings to make the design of the system as simple as possible, as easily understood as possible, while still providing the best outcomes. And that might be why approval voting in the end is the best solution, because it's so simple, because you're
Yeah.
literally asking people just give it a thumbs up or down on each candidate. It's essentially asking, what's your approval of this person? And
Mhm.
then the candidate with the highest approval rating wins.
Yeah.
And everyone understands approval rating. So,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
yeah, but
Well, let's talk about your decision to run for mayor. Um,
yeah,
Tell me a little bit more about why you're running.
sure. Yeah. So, I mean, a little bit about me. I was born in LA. But if you're in San Francisco and you're listening to this, don't hold that against me, please. My dad's parents spent much of their childhood in San Francisco, and I have family roots that go back in the city 5 generations. So, it's a city that's always been part of my family history, and like the lore of this grand beacon on a hill that represents hope and prosperity. It's always been appealing for me to live here. And so I kind of, at the first opportunity I had, I jumped to move to the Bay Area. And then, of course, I couldn't afford to live within San Francisco for the first year and a half. But I've been here now over 12 years, and I love living in the city. And from the day I moved here, it was already very apparent to me that there was some pretty serious breakdowns in government services, and just generally things were not run well here.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was focused on my job, which was and being an engineer at Tesla. So I didn't have the time to really look at it, because I was busy tackling the problem of our generation, which was avoiding catastrophic climate change. And I just
Hmm.
felt like, all right, I'd love to do something about that, but I don't have time. I've got to like work on this emergency first, and then I'll deal with that emergency. Um, so yeah, taking another step back. I mean, I was in LA. I went to MIT for college, double majored, and I studied electrical engineering, computer science, and brain and cognitive sciences. And then from there, I went to UCLA for grad school, and I got my PhD in neuroscience.
Hmm.
And it was pretty it was very interesting but very difficult work that I was doing. So I had to record from individual neurons in the vestibulocochlear nerve. That's cranial nerve number 8 for anyone who took their neuroanatomy. But I imagine this like little glass needle that you're poking, and it's a micron in diameter, 1 micrometer, trying to poke that into a nerve in a live chinchilla or bullfrog or guinea pig, and sticking it in a nerve and trying to get it close enough to an individual nerve cell running along from the inner ear to the brain stem. And that thing is also 1 micrometer in diameter. So you have these two tiny little, micrometer
Hmm.
scale things that you're trying to get as close as you can, and then you're going to move the whole preparation, because I was studying our sense of balance, and most people don't realize this, but in the inner ear there are these very sensitive accelerometers. They can detect static tilt, because there's gravity at all times pointing
Mm.
down, but they can also detect rotational movements. It's actually a very exquisite and beautiful system that we have, this micro mechanical system in there that translates what start out as basically fluid movements into electrical signals that go into the brain. So I was recording those electrical signals and then doing some complex mathematical equations to model what was going on, and represent, like, okay, this is a snapshot at any given time of what the brain is learning about how your head's moving through space from these these tiny little sensors in your inner ear. But it would be like 12 hours for a day sitting in a lab. I start out in the morning, have to wash my hands, prepare a surgical table, get out my scalpel, do essentially brain surgery on an animal, become an anesthesiologist, monitoring all their vital signs throughout the morning and into the late afternoon and evening. And while I'm doing all that, trying to collect these tiny, little voltages on the order of 100 millivolts in this tiny little nerve, and hope and pray that I could collect something useful for that day. And
Mm.
more often than not, there was nothing to show for my 12 hours. So needless to say, I was desperate for something a little more tangible in terms of like what kind of return on investment I would get for my efforts. There was also this whole other issue with science as an endeavor in this country is its own political problem. I mean, you have to be in the right lab, know the right people in the funding agencies if you want to get your projects funded, and it's all very derivative and slow. And I was interested in big ideas, and it seemed like it was just going to be impossible to work on really big, bold ideas in modern science in 21st century United States. So I had a friend who was at Tesla at the time, and she encouraged me to apply, and so I ended up there. That was 12 years ago, and I really learned what it took to take a small team of dedicated people who are good at what they do and focused on outcomes, and really make the impossible happen. And after 12 and a half years of doing that, I was tired and looking for a new challenge. And I think there's nothing more challenging than fixing San Francisco. So why not give it a try? I think I have a skill set that's pretty unique, certainly among the quote unquote prominent, non-long shot candidates that are in the news right now. None of them is from a quantitative background. None of them understand statistics, probabilities. Maybe Mark Farrell does, by virtue of him being a VC for quite some time, but he's trained as a lawyer. And I think in the 21st century, as technology continues to evolve at just an incredibly rapid pace, and it's continuing to accelerate, we need people who have a STEM background, who actually understand how these technologies work and can help us to get a little bit ahead of the curve, and predict what changes do we need to make in order to deal with the impending social upheavals that are coming with automation and artificial intelligence. And Yang touched on a lot of this with his presidential run, and pushing for UBI. And I'm doing the same thing with my platform. I'm proposing we can do a universal basic income. We can start at $1,000 a month for every resident of San Francisco. That's not an insane figure. If you look at the GDP per capita of San Francisco, it's about $300,000 per person in GDP. So there's a vast concentration of wealth and productivity in this region, and in the city in particular. And it shouldn't be that difficult for us to give just the bare minimum of a basic income for people to survive. And people desperately need that too, because if you look at the city's income distribution, 1 in 3 San Franciscans is earning less than a livable wage, as determined by that's the census data. And so I think it's high time for a candidate to really push hard to lift all of us in San Francisco out of poverty, and that'll have knock-on effects on crime and public safety and drug abuse and outcomes in schooling. All of those, as we well know, those of us who've been UBI advocates for a long time, those are all positively impacted by having that kind of guaranteed income for children as they're growing up and as young adults as well. So
Yeah,
that's really what's motivating me.
I love it. I think one of the things about UBI at the national level was, well, every citizen is eligible wherever you live. I'm curious, like when you implement it at the city level, wouldn't it, how would you deal with people from right outside of San Francisco moving in and getting the $1,000 a month? Like, how would you, like, would that be a concern, or how would you think about that?
So one of the other major problems in San Francisco is affordability of housing.
Hmm.
That's addressed to some extent by providing a UBI, but I mean, we also need to push really hard for building a lot more housing.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that in 2 ways. One, we can make it easier for the private sector to build. Right now, there's still a lot of barriers to building. There's zoning issues. There's just regulations at the state level with CEQA, with projects requiring rounds of review, and there's just city level red tape and fees and things that make it more difficult. But I am a big proponent of the idea of social housing, not to be confused with public housing in the old school sense of what are essentially ghettos that concentrate lower income people into housing projects that are then neglected, and make people who are from there the targets of ridicule or just being discriminated against by virtue of where you're from. I Social housing is a different concept, and you could look to places like Vienna and Singapore that have done it extremely effectively. They're housing the majority of uh, their residents in housing that was funded publicly, but it was built in the case of Vienna with private developers. You can do it in Singapore, like they did in Singapore with public housing authority and public developer as well. But basically, you can create housing that's widely available, universally available, just in the same way that universal basic income has a certain magic to it when you eliminate the means testing, that reduces the administrative costs and reduces the barriers to people actually getting it when they need it the most. And so, yeah, like I said, with Vienna, um, they're building beautiful buildings designed by world-class architects, and the rents are affordable for people at all income levels. And you don't have to show, oh, I'm making less than 300% of the federal poverty line, and let me prove it to you, and let me submit paperwork every year to prove I'm still making less than that so I can keep my housing. This is a totally different model that combines the best of the public sector in terms of having a large amount of capital that doesn't necessarily go away with the boom and bust cycle, and the private sector doing what they do best, building cost effectively in exchange for taking maybe a slightly reduced profit, but it's a guaranteed profit. And so I would be pushing hard for housing that's universal social housing. And so we could absorb more residents from the surrounding area. We also need to do a better job in San Francisco of incorporating new transplants into our city's culture, and that hasn't historically been the case. I guess it's a two-way street. You had a lot of tech workers moving in here who maybe had no interest in ever incorporating themselves into the fabric of the neighborhoods they were living in. They kind of saw it as almost like a hotel and vacation spot or something. And that was kind of borne out by the flight that happened during the pandemic. You saw a huge number of people moving out of the city, and rents dropped by 40% practically overnight as a result. But to really talk about all of the aspects of a UBI and how it will impact things. I think there's that first order effect of, yeah, maybe people in the surrounding area will want to move here. But I think serving as a model, showing that it's effective at tackling all the problems that we've been screaming about at the top of our lungs for decades now that UBI solves, it will inspire other regional cities, counties, perhaps even the state, perhaps even the nation to implement a UBI. And so I think in the long run, that will even things out. And San Francisco won't be the only place in within 100 miles where UBI is available. You'll actually be able to get your UBI in Stockton or in Riverside County. And in fact, your $1,000 a month will go a lot further in an area that's not quite as expensive as San Francisco. So again, I think it'll even out. I'm also proposing that one of the ways we can fund this universal basic income is through a land dividend. And so that also helps to kind of self-correct. The more people that are moving into an area, the more economic activities occurring. So that tends to increase land values, which would then be seen in an increased funding revenue stream for the UBI. So that's another way in which I think we're going to be okay if we implement this. But of course, as with any policy, there could always be unintended consequences, and it would be something we would definitely need to monitor and look at closely and be ready to change course if it turned out that I'm totally wrong. I think it's something that no one has ever tried. So why not give it a try and see if it works? And we know that what we're doing currently is not working. And I think we need something big and bold that will really shake things up if we're going to hope to crack this nut. I don't think we can just keep doing some incremental tack on policies here and there. They're really band-aids. They're treating the symptoms, not the disease. Or another way you can look at it is we're not paying down the principal. We're just paying on the interest right now, year after year after year. It's a waste of money.
So Dylan, when you look at San Francisco today, how would you score the state of the city? Like when you look at whatever data that you have access to, what's working well and where is San Francisco struggling?
That's a great question. And I think if you look at the heart of the average citizen, I'd rate it very high. I mean, people are unhappy and frustrated with the perception of the city in national press. The right wing media machine has really latched on to San Francisco as the poster boy for liberalism's failures.
Mhm.
And people are frustrated that we're seen that way, but there's a lot of people who also will acknowledge like there's something to it. There are some serious problems in this city, and um, you know, so people want to do something to help change things. They just don't know what that is that they can do really, other than continuing to support their local businesses, going to local restaurants and bars, and the city services. I think I'd give them a very low rating. For the most part, I mean, I think many city employees are doing the best they can, but they're put in a position where it's just not possible to actually affect change because there's no real effective plan coming from on high. With respect to homelessness, for example, I think one of the biggest problems with homelessness is that there's no real plan to tackle it. And once you have a plan, which is step one, then you would need like a strong leader who actually wants to implement that plan and hold people accountable to meeting the milestones of that plan. And we're not getting that either. And this isn't something I'm just coming up with on my own. I've been a huge supporter of an organization called Glide Foundation here in San Francisco. They serve 3 meals a day every single day to thousands of people in the Tenderloin, which is ground zero for the drug addiction problem and homelessness problem in the city. And I talked to the former CEO of Glide, and she straight up said that's the problem. We don't have a plan. No one's coordinating all of these well-meaning organizations who are spending huge sums of money. This is me talking now, not her, but I look at our budget and what percentage of it is going to outside vendors that aren't even, they're not actually city employees. They're 4,000 outside vendors that are raking in $5 billion, and that's over 10,000 contracts.
Mm.
And when I look at my experience at Tesla, granted, you can't run a government like you can run a private business. That's obvious, and people have tried to do that before, and it just doesn't work. But there has to be a happy medium here. And at Tesla, we did something that was called vertical integration, um, which basically means bringing as much capability in-house as possible so that you have more control over the timelines and more control over the final product.
Mhm.
This is something that made Tesla very successful when competing with the old automobile OEM companies out there, because they had, over the last 150 years, gradually migrated to this model where they don't actually do any of their own work. They just pay contractors and subcontractors and subcontractors to do all of the development of the technologies in their cars, and then it all gets kind of put together at the end. But that's expensive because you have middlemen taking a cut every step of the
Mm.
way, and it's slow, so it takes them on average 5 to 7 years to come out with a new product. And the end result is often sort of the age old adage, it's like designed by committee. So it's not going to be awesome. It might be good, might even be great, but it doesn't have that advantage of having like a strong overall vision for what it's going to be, that's then executed by a team of like-minded people that are all working towards the same goal. So I want to see the city of San Francisco adopt at least some of that philosophy of bringing capability in-house, really looking at, okay, what are our recurring costs? What do we know we're going to have to do year in, year out as a city to help our citizens? Why would we continue to pay top dollar to some private or nonprofit organization to do that work for us year in and year out, when we know we could bring it in house if we did it the right way, if we trained our employees properly, and we set up the systems to measure the outcomes that we needed to measure to ensure we're getting the results we want. why wouldn't we bring that in house? And then we're going to save money in the long run because we're not paying all these middlemen. And on top of that, I mean, we've had all these problems with nonprofit organizations taking money from the city and then essentially doing nothing with it. I mean, that's not every nonprofit, but there have been several prominent stories that came out where tens of millions, hundreds of millions possibly have been literally just wasted because the people who run some of these organizations they can't be trusted. You know, they're criminals who have lined their own pockets, and that those are their friends with city money. And so everyone's failing in that situation, except for those people who are getting rich off of it. The people who are in the city who desperately need help aren't getting the services they need. And the taxpayers, their money is being wasted. And yeah, I mean, I just think that it's not something that can happen overnight, but it is a goal we should be working towards. We should have a very well functioning city government that people are proud of, that people look to as a potential career choice, even in the face of other options that are in the private sector. You know, I mean, that's a big problem right now. I think that's been the case for a long time now. People who are highly qualified don't want to go into government because it's so much more lucrative to go into the private sector. And even within the private sector, you have your choice between certain things you can do. And the most lucrative of all tends to be, you know, oh, I'll go to Wall Street or, you know, do some kind of financial crypto, you know, whatever it is, whatever the latest, take your pick on creative financial instruments. People are migrating towards those options, and in some sense, I can't blame them because I personally am looking at getting into the city government, and I myself am doing it with a great deal of trepidation, and I recognize that it's going to suck because if I were to win, um, I would have to deal with all of these systems that are in place and all of the just this morass of laws and regulations and this, you know, siloed um, group of different departments that don't want to work together and all these turf wars. And I mean, it's it's not something that I'm relishing if I were to win, but I think it's in desperate need of reform and shakeup from within as much as from without. And so I, I'm hoping that the people of San Francisco will take a chance on me and give me an opportunity to try to change things from the inside as much as possible. And you know, I don't have any experience in government. That's something I get asked quite a bit, and I'm perfectly frank and upfront. And I say no, I have no experience in government, but I don't think that's a problem. I think the people who are in our government currently are the ones who got us into this mess. So number one, I don't think experience in government is necessarily all that great. And number two, I just think that like my experience outside of government is exactly why I'm well suited to fix things, because I've seen the other side. I've seen how it can be when you organize things in a more efficient way. And I have this unique experience of being a technologist. If anyone can propel San Francisco into the 21st century, it's someone like me who has been at the forefront of some of the, you know, bleeding edge technologies that are really changing our world around us. So I would love to have that opportunity to pull up, you know, push up my sleeves and get to work and work day in, day out tirelessly to solve problems.
Well, Dylan, it has been a pleasure. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, and maybe we'll get you back on the show and what might be fun is like we look at some of the budget kind of line items and see like where's this money going, or some statistics around housing or economic growth or whatever around kind of like the numbers behind San Francisco.
Yeah,
That
I'd
might
love
be
that.
really
Mhm.
fun. And you seem like the guy to talk to about that. Um,
Oh, I can
maybe
talk all day, as you can tell.
Yeah, no, it's great. Maybe one last thing before we wrap up. How can
Sure.
people learn more about your campaign and maybe help you out?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for that. So you can go to my website, votedylan.com, DYLAN,
Hmm.
votedylan.com, all one word. And you'll see I've got a huge, probably overly descriptive set of policies that I've put up there. And yeah, there's a support page you can go to. I'm actively trying to dissuade people from donating, but if that's the only way you feel like you can support the campaign, then I've begrudgingly put a donation page on there. But as I said at the beginning, I'm so tired of money being this driver in politics, and I don't want to be part of that problem too. I want to, as much as possible, uh, reach voters in ways that are more organic and don't cost me any money. So,
So
and
if you don't want them to donate, what would you want potential support?
so I mean, if you look at network effects within friend networks,
Hmm.
something as little as 7 to 10 friends. If you reach out to all 7 to 10 friends and you say, hey, look, this guy Dylan, he's running for mayor. I think he's the real deal. You should totally vote for him. Tell everyone you know. You can go through rounds of 10 friends reaching out to 10 friends, and you only need 3 or 4 rounds before I hit the threshold that I need to make it at least past the first round in ranked choice voting. Um, we talked about ranked choice voting at the beginning, and one of the things that ranked choice voting doesn't solve is vote splitting. That's still a problem in each round. So right now there's a lot of moderate, quote unquote, moderate
Mm.
Democrats running in San Francisco that will probably cannibalize each other's votes. You've got London Breed, you've got Mark Farrell, you've got Asha Safai, and you've got Daniel Lurie. They're all pushing a fairly, center right sounding agenda of more police and getting tough on crime and really emphasizing public safety and public drug use, and I agree those are important are important priorities to address for sure, but I don't necessarily agree with their solutions to those problems. And anyway, I think they'll split a lot of the vote. And then there's Aaron Peskin, who's the current supervisor, who's really been anointed the knight for the progressive cause. And I think my policies, if I can break through that barrier of being considered a serious electable candidate, which is again still a problem in ranked choice voting. People still have that mentality.
Mm.
Then I think I'll be competing for a lot of progressive votes with Aaron Peskin because universal basic income, universal social housing, using the 4 pillars approach to addressing drug abuse and like community-based alternatives to policing. These are kinds of things that progressives will really love. But I'm coming at it from a pragmatic point of view and saying, look, like I'm not just supporting these because they sound good and they make me feel warm and fuzzy. There's actually evidence behind them. They've worked in other places, and it would be crazy for us not to do what's working in other places. So even if they sound crazy, like let's look at all the data from the couple hundred pilot programs that have been done on guaranteed income all around the world, and let's actually implement it for real somewhere and see where it goes. Let's look at Vienna with their public housing, do real universal social housing and see how it works out. So
Well, Dylan, it has been uh, great to have you on the show, and we covered so much. And I can't wait to follow up this conversation soon. So we'll kind of coordinate offline, maybe at San Fran by the numbers kind of episode.
Love it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and we really appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak with you. And it's been a real pleasure to reminisce a bit about the old Yang Gang days as well.
Yeah,
So
man. There's a Bay Area Yang Gang reunion. I don't know if you saw the info about that.
I saw that you posted it on
Yeah,
I think it was on X, and
yeah.
I signed up, so I'll be there.
Love it. Well, I look
Yeah,
forward to seeing you, and
likewise.
hopefully we'll continue the convo soon.
Sounds great. Thanks,
Take care,
Tom.
Dylan. Bye.
Bye.